The transport pod's hatch opened with a mechanical hiss, releasing a cloud of iridescent vapor into Earth's atmosphere. Vex Luminera stepped out, her 7-foot frame ducking beneath the low doorway. Her silvery blue skin caught the morning sunlight, casting prismatic reflections onto the dewy grass beneath her feet. Behind her, the pod's pilot, a fellow Celestian half her size, avoided eye contact. "Your provisions and documentation are in the compartment," he said curtly. "The Council has arranged temporary housing in a remote area. You will receive no further assistance from Celestia." Vex's outer eyelids flickered, a sign of emotional distress among her kind. "The decision is final, then? You know the laws. Your unusual growth defies the sacred proportions. The elders believe your presence disrupts harmony." He gestured vaguely at her towering form. "This exile is merciful by traditional standards." Without further ceremony, he retreated into the pod. Minutes later, the silver vessel rose silently into the clouds, taking with it Vex's last connection to the world she'd called home for 27 cycles. Alone on the hillside, Vex allowed her shoulders to slump. On Celestia, the perfect symmetry of form was considered divine, a cultural obsession that had evolved into rigid social law. Her inexplicable growth spurt during adolescence had marked her as aberrant, a biological anomaly to be hidden away. For years, she'd endured increasing isolation, whispers, and finally, the formal hearing that ended with her banishment. Too large, they'd said. Disharmonious. As if her very existence was an affront to their aesthetic sensibilities. Earth had been chosen for her exile because humans were known for their physical diversity. Here, at least, she wouldn't be the only one who didn't fit a perfect mold. The small cabin provided by the Council sat at the edge of a dense forest, miles from the nearest human settlement. It contained basic furnishings clearly designed for human proportions, another reminder of her outsized existence. Over the next few weeks, Vex learned Earth's customs through digital archives. She studied human languages, social norms, and history. Celestians had observed Earth for centuries, but maintained minimal contact. Most humans remained unaware of their cosmic neighbors. Vex ventured into town for the first time on a rainy Tuesday. She'd fashioned a hooded cloak to conceal her alien features, the luminescent markings along her temples, the slight webbing between her fingers, her unusual height. The disguise drew curious glances, but no outright alarm. At the local market, she fumbled with unfamiliar currency while purchasing supplies. A child pointed, asking his mother why the lady was so tall. Vex froze, memories of Celestian rejection flooding back. "Everyone's different, honey," the mother replied, offering Vex an apologetic smile. "That's what makes people interesting." The simple acceptance in the woman's expression left Vex momentarily speechless. Such a concept was revolutionary by Celestian standards, where uniformity was revered above all else. That night, watching Earth's single moon from her window, Vex allowed herself to consider the possibility that exile might not be punishment but opportunity. On Celestia, she had always been the aberration, the mistake to be corrected. Here, perhaps, she could simply be herself, whatever that might mean. Still, as she traced the unfamiliar constellations with her finger, loneliness pressed down like a physical weight. Would she ever truly belong anywhere? Or was she destined to exist in this in-between space, too alien for humans, too different for her own kind? Tomorrow, she decided, she would look for work. Not just for survival, but for connection. If this planet was to be her home now, she would need to find her place within it, however unlikely that might seem tonight. The Botanical Research Center sprawled across 5 acres at the edge of town, its glass domes reflecting the morning sun. Vex approached cautiously, her resume, crafted with carefully modified details, clutched in her hand. The Help Wanted sign had been posted for weeks, suggesting humans might be reluctant to work in such isolation. For Vex, isolation was familiar territory. "Hello," she called, stepping into the humid main greenhouse. Her voice echoed among exotic plants from around the world, many bearing similarities to Celestian flora. A crash followed by colorful human expletives drew her toward the tropical section. There, surrounded by broken pottery and spilled soil, knelt a man with tousled brown hair and soil-stained hands. "Spectacular timing," he said without looking up. "If you're selling something, I'm busy creating disasters." "I'm here about the position," Vex replied, keeping her distance. She learned humans sometimes reacted strongly to her height. When he finally looked up, his eyes widened momentarily. Vex braced herself for the familiar reaction, discomfort, fear, or awkward attempts to hide both. Instead, he simply said, "Can you reach high places?" Yes. Thank goodness. He stood, revealing himself to be unusually tall for a human, though still nearly a foot shorter than Vex. "I'm Marcus Ellison. These Amazonian epiphytes need to be hung from the uppermost supports, and I've been balancing on increasingly precarious ladders all morning." He extended a soil-covered hand, then retracted it with a sheepish smile. "Sorry. Hazard of the profession." Vex carefully shook his hand, noting how he didn't flinch at the slight webbing between her fingers. "I'm Vex." "Unusual name," Marcus commented. "Beautiful, though." The compliment caught her off guard. On Celestia, nothing about her had ever been considered beautiful. Marcus showed her around the facility, explaining his research on adaptable plant species that could thrive in changing climates. He spoke with passion about saving endangered botanical varieties, his hands gesturing animatedly. "You're not from around here," he observed as they paused by a small pond. It wasn't a question. Vex tensed. "No. Neither are these," Marcus said, gesturing to violet-hued water lilies. "They're Southeast Asian, adapted to entirely different conditions than our local environment. Yet with the right care, they not only survive here, they thrive." He smiled at her. Sometimes being transplanted is the best thing that can happen to a species. By the end of the tour, Vex had been offered the job, assistant researcher with primary responsibility for the rarer specimens. Marcus seemed impressed by her knowledge of plant biology, which was extensive due to similarities between Earth and Celestian ecosystems. "There's a small apartment above the east greenhouse," Marcus told her. "It came with the property. You're welcome to it if you'd like to live on site." The offer of proximity to these familiar yet different plants was tempting. More surprising was that Vex found herself drawn to the idea of working with Marcus daily. His easy acceptance of her differences was refreshing after a lifetime of scrutiny. "That would be convenient," she answered carefully. As she gathered her things to leave, Marcus called after her, "Fair warning, I work odd hours and talk to the plants. If that's going to bother you, best to know now." For the first time since arriving on Earth, Vex felt herself smile genuinely. "I talk to plants too," she admitted. In my homeland, it's believed they understand more than we realize." "Then we'll get along just fine," Marcus replied with a grin that reached his eyes. Walking back to her temporary cabin to pack her few possessions, Vex found herself wondering if she'd just found a job, or something more elusive, a place where she might belong. Weeks passed in a pleasant rhythm of work and discovery. Vex found herself adapting to Earth's gravity, its foods, its unpredictable weather patterns. But most of all, she adapted to Marcus's presence. He worked with single-minded focus, often forgetting meals when engrossed in research. Vex began bringing him tea made from non-toxic greenhouse herbs, a Celestian habit that proved useful on Earth. "This is amazing," Marcus declared, inhaling the steam from a lavender mint blend. "Where did you learn to make these?" "Family tradition," Vex replied, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. She'd begun to hate the necessary deceptions, the careful editing of her past. One evening, as crimson sunset filtered through the greenhouse glass, Marcus was measuring growth rates of experimental hybrid orchids. Vex worked nearby, her long fingers gently pollinating rare specimens. "You have remarkably steady hands," Marcus observed. "Different muscle density," Vex replied without thinking, then froze. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but continued his work. "That explains a few things." The silence stretched between them until Vex couldn't bear it. "Aren't you going to ask?" "About what?" Marcus looked genuinely confused. "About me. Where I'm from. Why I'm." She gestured at her height, her unusual proportions. Marcus set down his tools. "Vex, I've suspected you weren't exactly local since the day we met. Your knowledge of plant biology is too advanced, your reactions to certain Earth customs too studied. But everyone has secrets. When you're ready to share yours, I'll listen." Something within Vex, something tight and defensive that had been wound since childhood, loosened slightly. "On my world," she began hesitantly, "symmetry and proportion are everything. Children are measured at birth and tracked throughout development. Those who grow according to the sacred ratios are celebrated. Those who don't are treated as though something's wrong with them," Marcus finished softly. Vex nodded. "I was within normal parameters until adolescence. Then I just kept growing. No one could explain it. Eventually, the council decided I was disruptive to social harmony. They exiled you for being tall. Marcus's incredulity was evident. For being different, Vex corrected. It's not about height specifically, it's about conformity. About everyone knowing their place in the cosmic design. Marcus approached her workstation, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his brown eyes. Their loss, he said simply. That night, working late cataloging specimens, their hands brushed. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through Vex's skin. Marcus's breathing changed slightly, and when their eyes met, something electric passed between them. I should finish this section, Vex said, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of her reaction. Right, Marcus agreed, stepping back. Big day tomorrow. The university researchers are visiting. But as they worked in companionable silence, Vex became acutely aware of his movements, his presence, in a way that transcended professional courtesy. When he reached past her for a tool, the brief proximity made her pulse quicken. Celestians rarely experience such physical awareness of others. Their connections were primarily intellectual, emotional. This visceral response to another being was unfamiliar territory, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. What would the council think of this development? Another aberration to add to her list of transgressions against Celestian propriety. Strangely, for the first time, Vex found she didn't care. The sleek diplomatic vessel landed under cover of night, its stealth technology rendering it invisible to Earth's detection systems. 3 Celestian representatives emerged, their perfectly proportioned forms moving with practiced grace. Ambassadors Tila and Miran, accompanied by Security Officer Dax, had come to Earth on official business, establishing formal relations with human governments. Their presence near Vex's location was no coincidence. Vex learned of their arrival through official channels now monitoring Earth broadcasts. Her heart sank. Though not explicitly stated, she knew they would seek her out, the embarrassing exile, the living reminder of Celestia's rigid standards. You seem distracted, Marcus noted as they prepared the greenhouse for the university delegation. Just nervous about the presentation, Vex lied. The academic visitors arrived promptly, admiring the research facility's innovative design. Marcus's presentation on climate-adaptive botanicals was well received, with particular interest in Vex propagation techniques for endangered species. The reception afterward featured local wines and botanically inspired appetizers. Vex was explaining germination acceleration to an interested professor when the room's atmosphere subtly shifted. 3 figures had entered, 2 female, 1 male, all with the unmistakable bearing of Celestians disguised as human dignitaries. Their eyes found Vex immediately. Oh no, she whispered. Marcus appeared at her side. What's wrong? Before she could respond, Ambassador Tila approached. What an unexpected pleasure to find you here, Citizen Vex, she said in the formal Celestian greeting tone. How interesting to see what occupation you found for yourself. Though speaking English, her inflection carried the cultural context no human would detect, the subtle emphasis marking Vex as inferior, unsuitable. Ambassadors, Vex acknowledged stiffly. This is Dr. Marcus Ellison, the facilities director. Tila barely glanced at Marcus. I see you've maintained your distinctive appearance. Still disrupting proportional harmony, I observe. Marcus frowned. Excuse me. Pay no attention, Tila told him dismissively. Vex's physical anomalies are her misfortune, not yours. Dax, the security officer, stepped closer. Perhaps we should discuss your situation privately, he told Vex. The council has questions about your activities here. Vex felt the familiar shame washing over her, the ingrained response to Celestian judgment. But then Marcus's hand found hers, warm and steady. Actually, he said with surprising authority, Vex is essential to our research program. Any questions about her work should be directed through proper academic channels. Ambassador Miran's expression tightened. You mistake the situation, human. Vex's presence here is merely tolerated. She holds no official standing. She holds standing here, Marcus countered. Her contributions are invaluable. Her differences are what make her exceptional. The word exceptional translated poorly into Celestian thinking, implying dangerous deviation rather than excellence. How fascinating, Tila replied coldly. She's convinced you her abnormality is somehow beneficial. Quite the manipulation. For years, Vex had accepted such assessments, believing herself fundamentally flawed. But seeing Marcus stand firm against their condescension ignited something new within her. My size doesn't define my worth, she said, her voice gaining strength. Here, I'm valued for my knowledge, my skills, not measured against an arbitrary standard of physical perfection. The Celestians exchanged alarmed glances at such heresy. "We'll speak later," Dax warned, "when you're not influenced by local opinions." After they departed, Marcus turned to Vex, his expression serious. "Those were your people." Not a question. A recognition. "Yes," she admitted, waiting for his reaction of fear, anger, betrayal. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand. "They're idiots." Vex blinked in surprise, then felt laughter bubble up, perhaps her first genuine laughter on Earth. In that moment, she realized two things simultaneously. She had fallen in love with Marcus Ellison, and she was finally free of Celestia's judgment. Dawn broke over the greenhouse, bathing the exotic plants in golden light. Vex stood amid the verdant growth, watching as Marcus approached with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "You left early," he said, handing her one. "Couldn't sleep?" 3 days had passed since the confrontation with the Celestian ambassadors. 3 days of uncertainty about what their presence might mean for her future. "The diplomatic vessel leaves today," Vex said. "They've requested I meet with them before their departure." Marcus's expression darkened. "Are they trying to take you back?" "I don't know." The possibility had haunted her nights. "Legally, they can't force me. Exile is considered permanent." He set down his coffee, turning to face her fully. "And if they invited you back? If they'd changed their minds about their sacred proportions nonsense?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither had yet voiced aloud. "Marcus, Her communication device chimed, the Celestian signal. With trembling fingers, Vex activated it, projecting a holographic message into the air between them. Ambassador Tila's face appeared, her expression as composed as ever. "Citizen Vex, the Council has reviewed your case in light of recent cultural exchanges with Earth. Diversity initiatives have been implemented on Celestia. Your condition would now be classified as acceptable variation. You may return, should you wish." The message ended abruptly, leaving Vex staring at empty air. "Well," Marcus said after a long moment, "that's quite the reversal." "Political expediency," Vex replied, her voice distant. "They need stronger Earth relations. My presence here is inconvenient, a reminder of cultural policies they're now finding diplomatically embarrassing." Marcus took a step closer. "Will you go?" The question contained everything they hadn't said, about the connection that had grown between them, about possibilities neither had dared voice. "I've spent my life wanting to belong somewhere," Vex said slowly. "On Celestia, I was always an aberration, tolerated at best, rejected at worst. Here, Marcus prompted when she fell silent. "Here, with you, I've never felt like I needed to be different. You saw me, truly saw me, from the beginning." Marcus reached up, his fingers tracing the luminescent markings along her temple, a touch she had never allowed before. "I've been falling in love with you since you first told those Bolivian orchids they were being dramatic about the pH levels." Vex laughed, the sound turning to something like a sob. "You heard that?" "I hear everything you say," he replied simply. "I see everything you are." Their first kiss was tentative, a bridge between worlds, between species, between two souls who had both known what it meant to be different. When they pulled apart, Vex rested her forehead against his, their breath mingling. "I'm staying," she whispered. "My place is here now." Later that afternoon, they stood together watching the Celestian vessel rise invisibly into the clouds. Only Vex-enhanced vision could track its departure. "Will you miss it?" Marcus asked. "Your homeworld." Vex considered the question carefully. "I'll miss the triple moonrises, the singing forests. But Celestia stopped being home long ago." She looked around at the greenhouse they had built together, at the rare plants flourishing under their care, at the research they were conducting that might help both their worlds. "I'm exactly where I should be," she said, "at exactly the size I'm meant to be." Marcus smiled, taking her hand. "I think we have a lot to teach each other about the universe." Above them, new seedlings unfurled in the controlled environment they had created, a perfect harmony of different worlds growing together, each contributing its unique strengths to create something entirely new. Just like them.